So, hello and welcome back yet again to another evening with Jules Verne, where I guess we're going to rescue someone from self-immolation? Question mark? I mean, noble idea. I'm not sure why Mr. Phileas Fogg, who doesn't seem to notice anything, has decided to do this, but go off. I mean, the lady in question definitely did not seem eager to join her husband, so I don't know. This book is weird. It's good. I do enjoy Jules Verne, but I don't think I like it as much as the other Jules Verne that I've read. At least not so far. It I was talking to Soul and Aaron about it, and it almost feels like in this book, and again, I don't know if this book is earlier in Jules Verne's career than the other ones or not. I kind of hope it was. It feels like he was trying to write more like the authors of his time, where he was spending more time writing about the scenery than writing about the characters. And I feel like, especially in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, we got so much more about the characters and their emotions than we're getting in this one. I'm not I'm not connecting with Phileas Fogg. I'm connecting more with Passepartout, and even he is sort of a caricature. And maybe that's my issue with these, is a lot of times they feel more like caricatures than characters. I don't know. I am not anyone who is versed in literature. I just kind of go on what I like and what I don't. But that's kind of my thoughts on this. We're going to go on and see what's going to happen, though. Maybe Phileas is going to surprise me and become a more likable character through this rescue of this woman. But based on the book so far, I'm not holding my breath on that. Anyway, let's jump in and see what is going on in chapter 13 of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, which is titled In Which Passepartout Receives a New Proof That Fortune Favors the Brave. The project was a bold one, full of difficulty, perhaps impractical. Mr. Fogg was going to risk life, or at least liberty, and therefore the success of his tour. But he did not hesitate, and he found in Sir Francis a enthusiastic ally. As for Passepartout, he was ready for anything that might be proposed. His master's idea charmed him. He perceived a heart, a soul under that icy exterior. He began to love Phileas Fogg. There remained the guide. What course would he adopt? Would he not take part with the native people? In default of his assistance, it was necessary to be assured of his neutrality at least. Sir Francis, quite frankly, put the question to him. Officer, said the guide, I am a Parsee, and this woman is a Parsee. Command me as you will. Excellent, said Mr. Fogg. However, said the guide, it is certain not only that we shall risk our lives, but horrible torture if we're taken. That is foreseen, said Mr. Fogg. I think we must wait until night before we act. Me as well, said the guide. Then the worthy man gave them some account of the victim, who he said was a celebrated beauty of their people, and a daughter of the wealthy Bombay merchant. She had received a thoroughly English education in that city, and from her manners and intelligence would be thought a European. Her name was Anuda. Left an orphan, she had been married against her will to the old Rajah of Bukerland, and knowing the fate that awaited her, she escaped and was recaptured and devoted by the Rajah's relatives, who had an interest in her death, to the sacrifice from which it seemed she could never escape. The guide's narratives only confirmed Mr. Fogg and his companions in their generous idea. It was decided that the guide should direct the elephant towards the pagoda of Pelage, in which he accordingly approached as quickly as possible. They halted half an hour after in a copse some 500 feet from the pagoda, where they were well concealed, but could hear the groans and cries of the fakirs inside. Then they discussed the means of getting at the victim. The guide was familiar with the pagoda of Pelage, in which he declared the young woman was imprisoned. Could they enter any of its doors while the whole party of Indians was plunged in a drunken sleep, or would it be safer to make a hole in the wall? This could only be determined at the moment and place by themselves, but it was certain that the abduction must be made that night, and not when at the break of day the victim would be led to her funeral pyre. Then no one would be able to save her. As soon as night fell, around 6 o'clock, they decided to make a reconnaissance around the pagoda. The cries of the fakirs were just ceasing. The people were in the act of plunging themselves into the drunkenness caused by liquid opium mingled with hemp, and therefore it might be possible to slip between them and into the temple. The guide, leading the others, noiselessly crept through the woods, and in 10 minutes they found themselves on the banks of a small stream, whence by the light of resin torches they perceived a pyre of wood, on the top of which lay embalmed the holy body of the Rajah, which was to be burned in the morning with his wife. The pagoda, whose minarets loomed above the trees in the deepening dusk, stood just 100 steps away. "Come," whispered the guide. He slipped more cautiously than ever through the bush, followed by his companions. The silence around was only broken by the low murmuring of the wind in the branches. Soon their guide stopped on the borders of the glade, which was lit up by the torches. The ground was covered by groups of men, motionless in their drunken sleep. It looked like a battlefield strewn with the dead. There were actually men, women, and children all lying there together. In the background, among the trees, the pagoda of Pelage loomed indistinctly. Much to the guide's disappointment, the guards of the Rajah, lit by torches, were watching at the doors and marching to and fro with naked sabers. Probably the priests as well were watching inside. The guide, now convinced that it was impossible to force an entry to the temple, advanced no further, but led his companions back again. Phileas Fogg and Sir Francis also saw that nothing could be attempted in that direction, so they stopped and engaged in a whispered colloquy. "It's only 8 now," said the brigadier, "and these guards may also go to sleep." "This is not impossible," said the guide. They lay down at the foot of the tree and began to wait. The time seemed to stretch forever. The guide, ever and anon, left them to take an observation on the edge of the wood, but the guards watched steadily by the glare of the torches, and a dim light crept through the windows of the pagoda. They waited until midnight, but no change took place amongst the guards, and it became apparent that their yielding to sleep could never be counted upon. The other plan must now be carried out. An opening in the walls of the pagoda must be made. It remained to be seen whether the priests were watching by the side of their victim as assiduously as the soldiers on the door were. After a last consultation, the guide announced that he was ready for the attempt and advanced, followed by the others. They took a roundabout way so as to get at the pagoda in the back. They reached the walls about 12:30 without having met anyone. Here there was no guard, nor were there windows or doors. The night was dark. The moon, which was on the wane, scarcely left the horizon and was covered by heavy clouds, the height of the trees only seeming to deepen the darkness. It was Not enough, though, to reach the walls. An opening in them must be made, and to attain this purpose, the party only had pocket knives. Happily, the temple walls were built of brick and wood, which could be penetrated with little difficulty. After one brick had been taken out, hopefully the rest would yield. They set noiselessly to work, and the guide on one side, Passepartout on the other, began loosening the bricks so as to make a hole 2 feet wide. They were getting on rapidly when suddenly a cry was heard in the interior of the temple, followed almost instantly by other cries replying from the outside. Passepartout and the guide stopped. Had they been heard? Was the alarm being given? Common prudence urged them to go back, and they did, followed by Phileas Fogg and Sir Francis. They again hid in the woods and waited until the disturbance, whatever it might be, ceased, holding themselves ready to resume their attempt without any delay. But, awkwardly enough, the guards now appeared at the back of the temple, and there installed themselves in readiness to prevent any surprise. It would be difficult to describe the disappointment of the party interrupted in their work. They couldn't reach the victim. How then could they save her? Sir Francis shook his fists. Passepartout was beside himself, and the guide gnashed his teeth with rage. The tranquil Mr. Fogg waited, though, without betraying any emotion. "We have nothing to do but go away," said Sir Francis. "Nothing to do but go away," echoed the guide. "Stop," said Fogg. "I am only due at Allahabad tomorrow before noon." "But what can you hope to do?" said Sir Francis. "In a few hours it will be daylight, and—" "The chance, which now seems lost, may present itself at the very last minute." Sir Francis would have liked to be able to read Phileas Fogg's eyes. What was this cool Englishman thinking of? Was he planning to make a rush for the young woman at the very moment of sacrifice and boldly snatch her away from her executioners? This would be folly. And it was hard to admit that Phileas Fogg was such a fool. Sir Francis consented, though, to remain to the end of this terrible drama, and the guide led them to the rear of the glade, where they were able to observe the sleeping people. Meanwhile, Passepartout, who had perched himself on the lower branches of a tree, was coming up with an idea which had first struck him like a flash, and which was now firmly stuck in his brain. He had commenced by saying to himself, "What folly!" And then he had repeated, "Why not, though? It is a chance, perhaps the only one, with such sots." Thinking this, he slipped, with the suppleness of a snake, to the lowest branches, the ends of which were bending almost to the ground. The hours passed, and lighter shades now announced the approach of daylight, though it was not quite light yet. This was the moment. The slumbering multitude became animated. The tambourines sounded, songs and cries arose. The hour of sacrifice had come. The doors of the pagoda swung open, and a bright light escaped from its interior, in the midst of which Mr. Fogg and Sir Francis could see the victim. She seemed, having shaken off the stupor of intoxication, to be striving to escape from her executioner. Sir Francis's heart throbbed, and, convulsively seizing Mr. Fogg's hand, found in it an open knife. Just at this moment, the crowd began to move. The young woman had again fallen into a stupor caused by the fumes of hemp, and passed amongst the fakirs, who escorted her with wild cries. Mr. Fogg and his companions, mingling in the rear ranks of the crowd, followed, and in 2 minutes they reached the banks of the stream and stopped 50 paces away from the pyre, upon which still lay the Rajah's corpse. In the semi-obscurity, they saw the victim, now quite senseless, stretched out by her husband's body, and then a torch was brought, and the wood, which was soaked with oil, instantly lit. At this moment, Sir Francis and the guide seized Phileas Fogg, who, in an instant of mad generosity, was about to rush the pyre, but he had quickly pushed them aside when suddenly the whole scene changed. A cry of terror rose, and the whole multitude prostrated themselves upon the ground. The old Rajah was not dead. Then, since he rose all of a sudden like a spectre, and took up his wife in his arms, and descended from the pyre in the midst of the clouds of smoke, which only heightened his appearance. The fakirs and the soldiers and the priests, seized with instant terror, just lay there, faces on the ground, not daring to lift their eyes and behold anything. The inanimate woman was borne along by vigorous arms which supported her, and which she did not in the least seem to be a burden. Mr. Fogg and Sir Francis stood up, the Parsee bowed his head, and Passepartout was, no doubt, scarcely less stupefied. The resuscitated Rajah then approached Sir Francis and Mr. Fogg, and in an abrupt voice said, "Let us be off." It was Passepartout himself, who had slipped upon the pyre in the midst of the smoke, and, profiting by the still overhanging darkness, who had delivered the young woman from death. It was Passepartout who, playing his part with a happy audacity, had passed through the crowd amidst the terror. A moment later, all four of the party had disappeared into the woods, and the elephant was bearing them away at a fast pace, but the cries and noise, and a ball which whizzed through Phileas Fogg's hat, apprised them that their trick had been discovered. The old Rajah's body, indeed, now appeared upon the burning pyre, and the priests, who recovered from their terror, perceived that an abduction had taken place. They quickly ran into the forest, followed by the soldiers, who fired a volley after the fugitives, but the latter rapidly increased the distance, and before long they found themselves beyond the reach of bullets and arrows. And that is the end of that chapter. It felt like I was missing pages, but I wasn't. Huh. Okay, well, that felt rushed. We're going to go with that felt definitely very rushed. There was a lot of talking about the structure of the pagoda and how pointless it was, only to have Passepartout come up with an idea. But I swear, it says that Passepartout is watching, but then not what? I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe I'm just dumb. It's entirely possible that I'm just dumb. That happens a lot. I guess we'll find out more when we rejoin this tomorrow and see what the next chapter has. What is the next chapter titled? In which Phileas Fogg descends the whole length of the beautiful valley of the Ganges without ever thinking of seeing it. Okay, so we have one action scene that's very, very brief, and then we go back into Phileas Fogg being the most stereotypical 18th century British guy ever. I don't know. Let me know what you thought of this chapter in the comments, because I'm curious. It was a chapter. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please do hit the thumbs up to encourage me to keep going with this book, which I will, but oh man, of all of the Jules Verne's books, I'm glad I didn't